In the forgotten corners of the Appalachian Mountains, there are towns that time left behind. Places where old superstitions aren't just stories told around a campfire, they are laws. In my town, the most terrifying legend of all was the curse of the twins. The elders believed that when a mother gave birth to twins, she wasn't bringing two souls into the world. She was bringing one human soul and one demon, wearing a human face. The rule was ancient and unspoken. One of the twins had to be eliminated. But when my brother and I were born, my parents defied the town. They kept us both. For 3 years, we were identical. We were normal. The town began to think the legend was nothing but an old wives' tale, until the day my true nature finally woke up. I was 3 years old. We were playing in the dirt near the edge of our property when a massive, aggressive farm goose attacked me. It bit my arm, drawing blood. A normal toddler would have cried. A normal toddler would have run for their mother. I didn't cry. According to my mother, I reached out with both of my tiny 3-year-old hands, grabbed the screeching bird by its thick neck, and squeezed. I didn't let go until the thrashing stopped. I didn't let go until I heard the bone snap. I dragged the bloody, broken carcass through the dirt, across the porch, and into the kitchen. I dropped it at my mother's feet. I looked up at her, covered in blood, and smiled. "I brought dinner," I whispered. My parents stared at me in absolute, paralyzing horror. The news spread through the town like wildfire. The elders demanded my blood. They said the demon had revealed itself. But because I was only 3 and because the animal had attacked first, the local sheriff warned the town against taking the law into their own hands. But my fate was sealed. From that day on, I was the outcast. If a stray dog barked at me, I killed it. If a kid threw a rock at me, I put him in the hospital. By age 7, I nearly beat the mayor's son to death after he insulted my family. I was a monster. And society knows exactly what to do with monsters. They couldn't send a 7-year-old to prison, so they sent me to Blackwood Asylum. For 12 years, I rotted in a windowless concrete room. The doctors didn't try to cure me. They chemically straitjacketed me. I lived in a haze of heavy sedatives, listening to the agonizing screams of the truly insane echoing through the vents at night. I was a ghost, buried alive in a sterile white tomb. My only tether to reality was my brother, my twin, the good one. Every single weekend for 12 years, he came to visit me. He brought me books. He taught me how to read through the reinforced glass of the visitation room. He told me stories of the outside world, of his job at the local wood shop. He was pure, kind, and relentlessly optimistic. His kindness was the only thing keeping the demon inside me asleep. Until one weekend, he didn't show up. A month and a half passed in absolute silence. No visits, no letters. When the metal door of my cell finally opened, it wasn't my brother standing there. It was my mother. I almost didn't recognize her. She had aged 20 years. Her hair was wild, her clothes unwashed, but her eyes were terrifying. They were completely hollow, yet burning with a quiet, lethal rage. She had signed my release papers. The drive back to our isolated property was suffocating. She didn't speak a single word. When we finally pulled up to our decaying house, the heavy scent of cheap antiseptic and rotting wood hit me. I walked into the living room. My father, a man who had never raised his voice in his life, was lying on a makeshift hospital bed in the corner. He was paralyzed. The town bullies, led by the mayor's son, had beaten him with iron pipes, shattering his spine. The corrupt local police had done nothing. They just looked the other way. My mother clenched her fists until her knuckles turned white. She looked at me, her voice trembling with a venom I had never heard before. "Your brother is dead." I walked into my brother's bedroom. His body was lying on the bed, covered by a white sheet. My mother hadn't let the mortuary take him. She had kept him in the house, preserving him in the cold. I pulled back the sheet. His face was peaceful, but his neck bore the deep, violent purple bruising of a rope. They said it was suicide. But as I stripped off his shirt, the truth of his life, the life he had hidden from me during his visits, was laid bare. His torso was a canvas of torture. Fresh lacerations, old scars, and exactly 11 deep, perfectly circular burns from a lit cigarette. For years, the mayor's son and his gang had used my brother as their personal punching bag. They broke his body, humiliated him, and finally drove him to hang himself. My mother stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "If you really are the devil," she whispered, her voice cracking, "go slaughter the ones who did this. Kill them all. And if you hate me for locking you away, kill me too." I looked at my brother's broken body, and then, for the first time in 12 years, I smiled. I didn't answer her. Instead, I picked up a pack of my father's cigarettes. I lit one. I took a deep drag, watching the cherry burn bright red, and then, without blinking, I pressed the burning ash directly into my own chest. My mother gasped, stepping back. I lit another, and another. I burned myself exactly 11 times in the exact same spots as my brother's scars. I took a knife and dragged it across my own skin, replicating every single wound he had endured. I was going to walk into that town. But the demon wasn't returning. No, the demon died in that asylum. I cut my hair. I put on my brother's blood-stained clothes. I looked in the mirror, and the illusion was flawless. I was my brother now, and I was going back to work. The next morning, I walked into the old auto repair shop at the edge of town. The smell of motor oil and sawdust hit me. The owner, an old mechanic named Sullivan, was the only person in this cursed town who hadn't treated my family like dirt. When he saw me, he dropped his wrench. "Son, what are you doing here?" Sullivan asked, his voice trembling with pity. "After what they did to you, after your father, you should be resting. I won't dock your pay." I mimicked my brother's gentle, subservient tone perfectly. I cast my eyes down just like he used to. "I'm fine, Mr. Sullivan. I need the work." Sullivan sighed, patting my shoulder. He had no idea he was touching a ghost. He had no idea the boy he loved was rotting in an icebox miles away. Before I could pick up a tool, the bell above the door chimed. It was Danny, one of the mayor's son's lackeys, the very guy who had held my brother down while they burned him. Danny smirked, leaning against a rusted Chevy. "Well, well, look who's back. Surprised you can even stand up, freak. Maybe next time we won't just use cigarettes." I didn't react. I just smiled, a weak, pathetic smile. "We'll see, Danny, we'll see." Danny laughed, spitting on the floor before turning to leave. "I'll tell the boss you're back. We're gonna have fun tonight." I didn't wait for tonight. When Danny went around back to the scrapyard to take a leak, I followed him. The junkyard was a maze of rusted metal and forgotten machines. Complete isolation. "Hey, Danny," I whispered from the shadows. He turned around, zipping up his jeans, a sneer forming on his face. "What do you want, freak? You want to beg?" He never finished his sentence. I lunged. In one fluid motion, I slammed him back onto a wooden workbench. Before he could scream, I drove a rusted steel chisel directly through the center of his palm, pinning his hand to the solid oak table. His scream was deafening, but the junkyard swallowed the sound. He thrashed wildly, blood pooling around the steel spike. "Are you crazy? The mayor's going to kill you! You're dead!" I pulled up a stool and sat beside him, watching him bleed. I leaned in close until my lips were almost touching his ear. "You guys really messed up," I whispered, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "My brother, he was the good one. His kindness was the only thing keeping the lock on my cage." Danny's eyes widened in sheer, absolute terror. The color drained from his face as the realization hit him. He looked at my face, and then he looked into my eyes. He saw the void. You're the other one," he stammered, hyperventilating. "You're the demon." I picked up a heavy iron wrench from the table. "Thank you for letting me out." The junkyard went dead silent after the first swing. By nightfall, the town was in an uproar. They found Danny's mangled body in the scrapyard. The mayor declared an emergency, demanding justice, but no one suspected me. After all, everyone knew I was just the weak, broken twin who wouldn't hurt a fly. The irony was sickening. The town asked Sullivan, the mechanic, to build Danny's coffin, and Sullivan asked me to help him. We worked through the night. The next day, I helped carry the cheap pine box to Danny's house for the wake. As we set it down in the living room, Danny's mother rushed at me. She slapped me across the face, her ring cutting my cheek. "This is your fault!" she screamed, spitting in my face. "You and your cursed family brought this evil into our town. You should have been the one who died." Danny's father shoved me against the wall, raising his fist. I could have snapped his neck in half a second. But I didn't. I cowered. I let them hit me. I let them curse my name. Sullivan intervened, pulling me outside, apologizing profusely for my incompetence. I wiped the blood from my cheek. I was exactly where I needed to be. Inside their house. They made me stay outside in the cold to guard the house while the family slept. Little did they know I was listening to every word spoken inside. Around midnight, I heard a window slide open. It was Trent, the mayor's son. He had sneaked into Danny's sister's bedroom. Through the cracked window, I listened to them. They weren't grieving. They were laughing. "With your brother gone, you get the whole inheritance," Trent whispered. "And tomorrow we pin the murder on the freak. We'll tell my dad we saw him do it. The town will hang him by noon." Danny's sister giggled, sealing my brother's fate with a kiss. That was all I needed to hear. I quietly walked to the shed and found 2 jerry cans of gasoline. I poured them around the perimeter of the house, soaking the wooden foundation. I chained the front and back doors shut from the outside. Then I struck a match. The old dry wood went up like a powder keg. Within minutes, the house was a towering inferno. The screams started soon after, frantic pounding against the chained doors. Trent managed to break a window, gasping for air, but I was waiting in the shadows with a steel pipe. One swing to the skull sent him tumbling back into the flames. But I wasn't done. I walked into the blazing living room, the heat blistering my skin. The parents were trapped, coughing violently, huddling near the coffin they had made me build. I grabbed a hammer and a handful of long iron nails. As the fire raged around us, I calmly walked over to the coffin. "I told you I brought evil into this town," I whispered to the terrified parents. I grabbed them by the hair and threw them into the pine box, right on top of their dead son's body. They screamed and clawed, but I slammed the lid shut. Thud, thud, thud. I hammered the nails in one by one, sealing them in the dark as the flames finally consumed the room. I walked out of the burning house untouched by the fire. The slaughter had begun. But the true architect of my family's misery, the mayor, was still breathing. The next morning, the smell of charred wood hung heavy over the town. The mayor called an emergency meeting at the old town hall. The entire community was there, their faces pale with fear and sleep deprivation. I sat quietly in the back row, wearing my brother's oversized flannel. The mayor stood at the pulpit, his eyes locked onto me. "4 people died last night," he boomed, his voice shaking with a mix of grief and rage. "And there is only one person who survived the fire unscathed, the freak." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I stood up slowly. I kept my head bowed, my voice trembling perfectly. "I tried to save them," I lied. "But the fire, it moved too fast. I saw someone running away into the woods." "Liar!" the mayor spat. He ordered his deputies to seize me. They threw me into a dark underground holding cell beneath the precinct, locking the heavy iron door. I didn't resist. In fact, I wanted them to lock me in. Because what they didn't know was that Sullivan, the mechanic, had slipped a sharpened wood-carving knife into my pocket earlier that morning. I wasn't trapped in a cage with them. They were trapped in a cage with me. Around midnight, I heard the heavy boots of 2 deputies coming down the stairs. The mayor hadn't sent them to interrogate me. He had sent them to hang me in the cell and make it look like a suicide. As they unlocked the door and stepped into the dark cell holding a coil of rope, I struck. I lunged from the blind spot behind the door, driving the carving knife straight up into the first deputy's jaw. He dropped the rope, choking on his own blood. The second deputy fumbled for his revolver, but I was already on him. I buried the blade deep into his chest, twisting it until his eyes rolled back. I took the keys and walked out of the cell, my clothes soaked in blood. The precinct above was nearly empty, save for 3 of the town elders who had gathered to drink whiskey and celebrate my impending suicide. When I walked into the lobby, they froze. "You should have burned me at the stake when I was 3, I whispered. I didn't use the gun. I used the knife. I butchered them in the lobby of their own precinct. I made sure they felt every single cut, every single moment of terror that my brother had felt for 12 years. By the time I walked out of the precinct, the town's leadership was dead. But the man who orchestrated my brother's misery was still missing. I headed back to Sullivan's auto shop to clean up. But as I opened the garage door, a deafening shotgun blast tore through the night. A heavy slug grazed my shoulder, spinning me to the ground. Standing in the shadows of the garage was the mayor. He pumped the shotgun, staring at me with a terrifying grin. Behind him, Sullivan was slumped against a toolbox, bleeding profusely from his stomach. "I knew it," the mayor chuckled, stepping closer. "I knew you were the demon. I just needed you to wipe out the loose ends before I put you down." I gripped my knife, panting. "Why?" I asked. Sullivan coughed up blood, looking at me with absolute despair. "He swapped them," Sullivan wheezed. "The mayor's wife had a stillborn. He paid the midwife to take your brother. The boy you thought was your twin was the mayor's true son." The room spun. The mayor had spent years ordering the town to torture his own biological son, just to maintain the illusion and eradicate my cursed bloodline. The mayor raised the shotgun to finish me off, but in his final moment, Sullivan lunged from the floor, driving a rusted screwdriver directly into the mayor's femoral artery. The shotgun fired into the ceiling as the mayor collapsed, screaming in agony as he bled out on the oily concrete. Sullivan looked at me one last time, closed his eyes, and died. Bleeding, exhausted, and broken by the truth, I stumbled back to my childhood home through the pouring rain. I walked into the kitchen. My mother was sitting at the table, perfectly still. She looked at the blood soaking through my shirt. She knew what I had done. The town was decimated. The bullies, the mayor, the elders, they were all dead. I fell to my knees, resting my head in her lap. I was the monster she had unleashed. But for the first time in my cursed life, I just wanted a mother's comfort. I wanted to be loved. She gently stroked my hair. "It's over now," she whispered softly. "You did exactly what I needed you to do." She poured me a cup of warm tea and handed it to me. I drank it greedily, the warmth soothing my trembling body. But as I swallowed, my throat seized. A burning chemical fire erupted in my stomach. My vision blurred. I looked up at her, gasping for air. My mother stared back at me, her face completely devoid of emotion. Blood began to trickle from her nose. She had drunk from the same teapot. "Did you really think I could ever love a monster?" she whispered, her voice fading. "I hated this town for what they did to my family, but I hated you just as much for bringing the curse into my womb." She used me as a weapon to burn the town to the ground, and now that the war was won, she was breaking the weapon. Through the kitchen window, I saw the flickering orange glow of torches. The remaining townsfolk were marching up our driveway, armed with pitchforks and rifles, coming to kill the demon. But they were too late. I closed my eyes, the poison finally taking me into the dark. The legend was true. The demon had destroyed everything, including itself.